Welcome to the Intelligent Teams podcast, where we interview leading thinkers from business and the sciences of mind to find new ways to help your teams and organizations thrive. I'm your host, Daniel Sasser. This week's guest on Intelligent Teams is Nisha Joshi. Nisha is an executive coach and transformation leader with over 2 decades of experience driving impactful change across industries from logistics and retail to broadcast media and startups. She specializes in aligning culture, and we're going to spend a lot of time on culture in this conversation, leadership and execution to help organizations achieve strategic clarity and high-performing teams without friction or burnout. Nisha is the co-host of the Delivery Space podcast, where I've been a guest. Don't mean to brag, but I do, where she and other industry leaders explore the realities of leadership, culture and transformation, cutting through the noise to reveal what truly drives success. She speaks at industry events. She helps senior leaders shift from firefighting delivery challenges to creating cultures of autonomy, collaboration and innovation. Welcome, Nisha, to Intelligent Teams.
Hello, Dan, and thank you so much for having me on.
We're here to talk about transformation and culture and intelligent teams and how this stuff works. So what is it that brought you to be interested in the topic of culture, and how comes that's been a theme for you?
Oh, it's been, and I know you'll chime with this, because I've been working in transformation for so long. One of the key things is that level of relatedness on a very human level that drives things forward, that moves things, that helps you bring releases over the line, that helps you meet those KPIs or OKRs that you've set yourself, that helps them come to life. It's only humans in their relatedness, in their understanding of each other, in their understanding of this is my personal goal, this is what the business wants to achieve, how can I have that interrelate so I feel a sense of satisfaction at work. It's those elements that when you bring them to life and you understand people around you and you go to the effort of understanding people around you, that really draw you to success. So you developing that, and if I think about transformation efforts that I've been part of that haven't done well, transformation efforts that I've been part of that I think, wow, I am so stoked to have been involved in that. And I've walked past those teams before and I've looked at those teams and I've said, I want to work like you. What's stopping me working like you? I'm getting to that stage where I'm part of those teams. I'm instrumental in kind of building those teams and that kind of environment where you're building that natural cohesiveness between people. So I know I've made a long answer of that, but I think if I was going to distill it, it would be the level of human relatedness and making sure that you can identify a correlation between your personal goals and where the business wants to go. And it's not that, and like as Ed Schein, the granddaddy of organizational development and culture, would put it, it's not those values that you have printed on the wall. It's taking those off, humanizing them and understanding and having conversations with each other about what do they mean to David in this setting? What do they mean to Nisha? What do they mean to Dan? What do they mean to somebody else in this setting? And how do we relate to each other in that, in the time that we share? Because God knows, friend, you spend more time with your folks at work than you do with your family during the working week, right? And culture is a big decider in a company of whether you think that is time that's spent that is worthwhile to you, that is satisfying you, or whether you think, hold on, mate, this is contradictory to my own inner values. I need to make tracks.
Yeah, it's the thing that draws me to culture as a topic, especially in the context of intelligent teams, is like human culture is it's a really important part of this human species that we are in this organism.
Yes.
And it's a huge, complex, but also simple topic. Like I was thinking about this today. I was walking the dog, and whenever you use the word culture around my mum, she'd always say, "Well, culture is reality defined," and I don't know what that means. But there's something about when culture is trying to put words around the experiences that we all have.
Yes.
My cultural world might be significantly different to someone who lives next door to me and has had a similar looking upbringing, but we might have different reasons, family cultures, cultures of the country you live in, the city you're in, the family, I don't know, the part of the family that you're in might have its own microculture, and when we try and take those big anthropological human level things and we bring them into an organization, or we apply those lenses to an organization, like what appears there?
I completely agree with you. So, we were talking before we came on and we were framing this conversation. I think teams can have their own subculture. And, I was talking to you about the piece of work I recently did for Glass, Global Loans Agency. So I did a piece of culture work for them, and that came about in a really, really lovely way. I was welcomed with open arms by the CEO, who said, "Nisha, we need this work done. We are expanding, we're growing, we're acquiring other companies, we're merging with others. What does that culture look like to bring us forward? Because we've just focused on growth. We've moved from 13 people when we first founded the business now to 300. When I was working with them, about tail end of last year, I helped orchestrate this exercise across 7 global locations. And I know every few months I see posts from the CEO as she's doing the rounds and she is reporting more expansion of the company, right? And the first thing when I got people together across those different locations, and I introduced, and I really do not like icebreaker exercises that are nothing to do with the topic of a workshop or the bringing together or facilitation session. I brought them together, and the first question I asked them was, disappear off into these meeting rooms. It was like a little sponge exercise at the beginning whilst they were all gathering, and talk to each other about the culture stories, the stories that made a massive impact. What was your first experience of culture in an organization? And feel comfortable to share what you did. And one of the biggest bits of feedback that I got, obviously, where we love facilitating, we love to hear what people think of our sessions, was that they really loved sharing that piece of information because they could bring their stories, they could share their stories around what means something to them in a culture that they've experienced, negative or positive. And that was one of the most wonderful things, how we actually kicked that session off.
And stories are such an important part of it, right? Like culture, in a way, I don't know if this is too grandiose.
Yes.
Culture is the stories that we tell about the people and the objects and the relations around us. So the
Yeah.
stories that I bring to my workplace of the kind of employee I am, the kind of team we are, the kind of work I've done, all the stories that each of us brings will go into this cultural melange, this soup, this mixture that everyone brings. Um, so I'm interested to start maybe a step back from this big complex question of what is culture, how do we work with it. I guess that's where we'll get to what a bit of an analysis of the topic of culture and working with organizations and their cultures, and then maybe into some of the more practical stuff. You already mentioned about good culture can enable better collaboration, and maybe could you share a bit more about that? Like, in what ways is culture an enabler to, or a disabler to successful collaboration? Is that the right question?
Yeah, and I like that question, and it's also forcing me. I like it because it's also forcing me to take a step back. And I think we kind of alluded to this when you and I were chatting at the top of the session, and that's like that culture change can be an enabler only if you accept that at the very beginning, when you're considering culture of an environment and of a place and of putting yourself in that space of relatedness, very at the very, very beginning, it's about internal rewiring first. Rather than, okay, I need to get into an environment, I need to understand their processes, I need to understand how they work and then put myself in it. Right? What that allows you to do, if you first accept that it's about internal rewiring, that puts you in more of an open stance so that you're listening to yourself first in terms of, well, how do I feel about either these values or the interactions that I'm hearing? How do I want to contribute to the collaborations, and putting myself in the best space to listen, to observe, to empathize, for example, and those are all good elements of collaboration. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say like that for me, it's very much an inside out job.
So, like, if I'm joining a place, the internal rewiring is something that I, the joiner, do, is what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
I,
and it's sometimes it's not. You may not need to rewire yourself, but it's more like it's a way that I would express to myself if I was joining somewhere. Hey, Nisha, you know what? Stay open, listen, try and absorb, try and understand what brings people to the conclusions that they are coming to, how they're interacting, how they're relating to each other, and really try and get the how do you say, tune in to the environment that you're in, right? Understand what level of solidarity there is, what levels of sociability there are. But you can only do that if you've got a level of like either stillness and openness in yourself. That's what I mean.
so maybe that's like one element of the question, which is like, what are some of the things that make cultural transitions for people easier? I guess what I mean is, or what I was initially getting at, which, and that's also like, I want to spend time on that as well, is like, if you have a sort of a helpful culture, or like a good culture, or a high performing a culture that leads to high performance, let's say, because maybe there's
Right.
different kinds of high performing culture. How does that? What's the mechanics of how that can help a team or an organization succeed, as compared to an organization that doesn't have a productive culture or doesn't have a helpful?
Okay. The things that I've experienced are the freedom to speak up. So you've got that level of psychological safety. That's like one of the first things. You've got a level of openness. So if you're entering a space or you're starting a new role, people are very accepting of you joining. So there's a there's a big amount of openness there. You feel that there is respect in the way people are speaking to each other. You're hearing like active debates and arguments, but no one's leaving those sessions with hurt feelings, because you know that at the end of the day, they're going to be leaving with constructive ways to move situations forward, right? So there's no hurt feelings. No one's taking anything personally. But that's because they've put the time and the work in to form that relatedness, right? And whether they do that through increased levels of solidarity, whether they do that through increased levels of, no, I didn't mean solidarity there, I meant sociability. So they care about enough about each other to spend time with each other after work, for example, or if they're remote, they're hanging out for half an hour on a Friday afternoon, just, not talking about work, but just going, right, how's this week been for you, Dan? what are your plans with your girlfriend over the weekend? What are you going to be up to? Just trying to understand, like, you know, what you do outside of work. What, like, what brings you happiness outside of work? What brings you joy? What makes you tick? And that's a really nice feeling. Again, that's pointing to that relatedness, that openness, that genuine interest you want to take, and it contributes to the level of collaboration. So if immediately those types of things, I have seen and I've experienced directly, because I'll only talk about what I've seen really really works, but it is that openness, that I bring it back down to those 5 values in Scrum that I relate to, because they match my kind of internal value system. So immediately, when I first came across it, I was like, yeah, hey, this is how I like to relate to people. So yeah, I would pretty much encapsulate it in what I've just said there.
For those of us that aren't, in case there's anyone here that is not familiar with the Scrum guide, should we see if we can get the 5 values off the bat? I should have them like posted on the wall somewhere. Openness, transparency.
I got them. Commitment, focus, openness, respect, and courage. There you go.
Nice. Yeah, and it's like whether it's the 5 like the 5 Scrum values or other values. Do you think it's possible to have a high performing culture or a high performing organization where you don't have people with interest in each other's lives outside of work? There's like something else takes its place, or is that a sort of a necessary precondition for you?
I would ask you a question in return to that, right? So, again, this is a pattern that I've recognized, but have you ever seen when you've just been out of an evening, if you've been co-located, right? If you've been out for an evening with the people that you're working with, or the people that you're working on something towards, or people that you're on a WhatsApp chat with, and you agree to meet up in some space. How have the quality of the interactions been afterwards between you? You come back to work the following morning, you're catching up in the kitchen after you've been out. How has that interaction changed?
It tends to be like softer and more open and more varied and more real
Yeah,
or more human.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I guess the question is that if I don't have like that's definitely nicer. I definitely prefer it. I definitely want those relationships in my life and at work and things like that. Is it possible to be a good team without that though? We show
In
up and
terms,
we get the
well,
job done or something, but
yeah, you can. You can show up and get your job done, but sooner or later, because we are humans and we're wired to want to be able to you've got to understand someone. You're interpreting a user story, for crying out loud. You've got to understand the workings behind it, right? Like, if you just, we're kind of like beyond that space now of, hey, I'm a product owner or I'm a business analyst, and I'm giving you a story, and you're treating that as like an old fashioned software spec. You're a developer, Dan, and you're going, right, okay, great, thanks for that spec. I'm just going to go off and develop it. Now you need to have that conversation. Well, what does that mean in the bigger context of the system? And the system being like the technical system, plus the way that humans, whether they're consumers, whether they're internal users, how they're interacting with that system of interaction that you are building, technical and the non-technical parts. So I think it's useful to have that social interaction, and I think sooner or later, and again, I know my biases because I know which one I'd prefer, right? Sooner or later, it would become quite wearing, and you'll get to a space where you're just a feature factory, and what you're doing is you're just outputting stuff that you think is expected of you. But are you outputting stuff that, inspires empathy for a consumer or a customer? Are you outputting stuff where you're creating a little bit of friction with your product owner and your stakeholders in the nicest possible way, and having that constructive dialogue? I don't agree. Do you think they really go with that type of interaction with the system, the consumer? Do you really think that's what they want? And you feel safe in asking those questions without thinking, oh, hold on a minute, I'm going to be put down, right? So I think it's immediately maybe not necessary, but yeah, work towards it because it's going to help you.
Over time, even if like every day it's not necessary,
Yeah,
take the span of a decade or a few years,
yeah,
it's an enabler. Yeah,
yeah.
I think I agree with that. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because everyone can think of a team that seems quite high functioning and does what it needs to do without that, and but at what cost, or what are the blind spots, or what are the scenarios where teams like that we leave ourselves at the door and show up in role.
I'll
Those
tell
teams
you,
make certain
yeah,
kinds of mistake as well.
yeah, I'll tell you a story, Dan, and I'm really like, it makes me really sad, and it's from one of my past roles, actually. Um, don't worry, I'm not going to cry on you, but I've got to share this.
Crying welcome in the Intelligent Teams podcast.
Ah, thanks, man. But it really saddened me because I did work in an environment like that. And it's an environment where I later found out there was a lot of blame. And there was an underlying blame culture. So, there would be days when I was like, I was a scrum master and I was sitting next to the business analyst, literally sitting next to them, and emails would pop up on my system from them for things that they could just reach out, tap me on my shoulder if I had my headphones on or whatever, and say, hey, Nish, you know what? This is the case with this. This is why we made a decision to do this. I sat with a key stakeholder from the business and we decided to do this. But instead, that was kind of a little bit jarring because I'd just come from a contract where we would talk to each other about everything in the team. It was all around a board. We had an Abaya set up. We were trying to involve other teams within the organization in a transformation effort. And so there was a lot of talking. The emphasis was a lot of interaction. And I got spoilt by that, right? I felt like, oh, I've been spoiled rotten. And my immediate reaction was, what have I done wrong? Why does that person feel like they can't come to me? And that, yeah, slowly being part of that culture, being a little bit still in myself, observing, not taking things personally, the system started revealing itself to me in terms of what was present. So yeah, it gave me good information. Like, it felt a little bit jarring, but it was good information in terms of what there was present.
This is not at all the point you were making, but what is an Abaya setup?
Oh, it's making stuff visible around you, right? So you have got your burn down that's visible, for example, at very basic level. You've got your work item age, you've got your cycle time, and those types of things that help you really understand how smooth the flow of work is through that iteration that you're working through, right? So I'm not holding on to something because I don't have feedback from a stakeholder, for example, and it's just sitting there, and it's delaying what my team needs to be delivering at the end of a piece of work, if you like. So in the most simplest sense, that's what it is. It's just making everything visible so you can see progress right in front of you every day, and your team has got something really sensible and really constructive to talk about.
I'm going to make what might be a tenuous connection, but
Okay.
I think that's the point, right? I was having dinner with some of my parents' friends a couple of weeks
Yeah.
ago. So I'm from a Jewish family, and
Yeah.
many of my parents' friends are Jewish, and they were saying that they had a workman come round, and looked at their lounge and said, "Oh, like you've got like one of those Jewish lounges." And they were like, well, what does that mean? And it's what they meant was like a knocked through dining room,
Living
lounge,
room thing.
living room setup, where you've got like a dining
Yeah.
room, like an arch or something, and a living room. And like this work person had noticed that lots of the Jewish families they work with have those kind of setups, and it's a certain thing. So the reason I'm saying that is it interests me that when we're thinking about culture and team culture, it's often easy to think about like how do people talk to each other, or it's very in the
Mm.
ephemera of the words that we use and the way that we
Yes.
feel about each other and the relationships. And like, yes, it is that. The Abaya setup thing is interesting because it's not just about the words that we use and like, how we communicate with each other. But it's also about the kinds of spaces that we occupy together and how this is my cognitive science angle on it. The way that we interact with our environments there. And that work person who went to my parents' friends one, they saw that like the way that you know that you're like in a Jewish house is there's something about the setup of it. There's the kind of books you'd see on the wall. There's even a way that they might structure the lounge to facilitate, I don't know, long dining room dinner tables with lots of guests on a Friday night or something.
Yes. Yeah.
And those are all cultural artifacts or cultural signifiers. And similarly, if we think about like a scrum team or a different kind of team, well, what does the space look like? And what are the artifacts they're using? And what are the like physical objects that mediate and are the are sort of held sacred almost among that team? That also is a definition of the culture. It's not just something that you put up on the wall and can be described in.
No. Oh God, I love that example. I absolutely love that example. And culturally, I can relate. We had a lot knocked through lounge when I was growing up as well, because mum liked to cook. She's the matriarch and she used to invite a whole load of family around very, very often. I used to get teased, right? So I used to get teased rotten by the little boys in my neighborhood, and when we used to knock around and play together, and they used to say, "Do you know what, Nisha? I can see your back garden through your front window." Um, you know,
Ooh, sick burn.
yeah, exactly, right? And so I can completely culturally relate, and I love that's not a tenuous link. That's a lovely link that you just made there to that Abaya setting that you would make for your team. And you all have a say in it. That's the wonderful thing, that when you're first setting up a team, and especially, it doesn't even have to be an agile team. You could be working using lean principles, for example, but you have a say in what does that space actually look like for you. What do you want to come to every day, where you can actually own that progress and go, oh, do you know what, I've been holding on to that one for a while, or you know what, we've got too many things in progress. Let's see what we can do about that, guys. Who needs help on this particular item, for example? And that way, you're managing risk so proactively, like it becomes part of your DNA, doesn't it? It's a lovely way to bring people together, and it's the challenge though I found. I don't know if you found this, Dan. The challenge that I found as a practitioner is to give people that reassurance that it's not there for scrutiny, but it's there for them, to give them useful information to come together, work together, and they have a say in the metrics that they want to track and what they want to see, the artifacts they want to see.
Yeah, I guess like the analogy to the home type thing is like there's a different feeling from a home where things are personal and it's full of stuff that they want versus I guess like extending like in the Jewish community where like there are places where you I get if everyone has exactly the same thing, exactly the same artifacts, exactly the same stuff. There's maybe a question of like, do you want this, or is this
Right.
there because of like everyone else has it, or keeping up with the Joneses, or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe that's a similar thing to the metrics or to the not keeping up with the Joneses, keeping up with the Cohens. Um, uh,
Or the Joshies,
or the
which,
Joshies, yeah.
yeah, Joshies is a pretty common surname. Yeah.
So yeah, keeping up with the Joshies, and that's why we have the knock through lounge. But whether the the physical manifestations of the culture or the parts of, are they manifestations or are they components of the culture? Are they there because it's expected and it's management making them do it, or are they there because the team appreciates them and uses them and can engage in a sort of living way? Is there a vitality to the team's physical culture?
Oh, I really like that. It brings vitality to the teams if they get to choose it, right? So I love this quote by Ed Shine. Yeah, I hope I can call him Ed Shine, but Edgar Shine, who wrote Organizational Culture and Leadership. And it's, if you do not manage culture, it manages you. And this is the team being empowered to say, this is how we want to work. This is how we want to monitor our own progress. This is how we want to communicate our own progress. And this is how we want to own our work. So it builds that sense of ownership, that pride behind the craftsmanship that goes into creating something that you know your end users in the organization or your customers are going to use at the end of the day. It's going to fall into someone's hands what you're making. And that's like a, yeah, that's a wonderful thing to be able to empower a team with, and get them excited about, you know, that's, yeah, yeah,
And it's the flip side from the internal rewiring point you made earlier. Because if,
yeah.
as an internal rewirer, I come in and I go, right, my job here is to like absorb and adapt. But as a managing culture person, my job here is to come and influence or to be aware or to try and shift the culture in a certain way. And there's a kind of tension there, right? Between how much am I, there's a fundamental question at the heart of culture stuff. How much of it am I subject to the emergence of culture? And seeing what comes out between when we
Yeah.
fiddle with the layouts of the rooms, the rules, the interactions between people, the company values. How does that change the culture, if at all? The bonuses, the incentives, the whatever, the policies, and how much am I there to like surface and articulate and play back culture, and how much am I there to
Yeah.
like build it and make it and shift it and manage it and change it and something like that. So I'm wondering, how does that, if A, is that true, and B, what do you do about that as a practitioner of organizational cultural change?
So I think it's not a flip side. You know that instinctively, thinking about the experiences that I've had, I think it's like a multi-level focus thing. So I think it's connecting the individual, the team, and the system level behaviors together. So, you know, let's say if, and you're going to be doing this, right? You're going to be joining a new organization. I'm currently looking for a role. I'm going to be joining a new organization. So you and I are going to be in prime position, and going to be in that space where we are soaking that up and understanding, okay, so what's our place as individuals? What's our place in this system? What are the expectations and what we would like to get out of it and how are we relating to it? Then we're going to be introduced to our teams. And then it's understanding those teams or building those teams up and building that level of relatedness, rather than going into a team and understanding what your context is, right? And then it's understanding like those system level behaviors. Now it's not as sequential as I've made it sound, but this is what I mean. It's like a multi-level focus. And especially when you're a new person entering into these environments for the first time, you're starting a new role, etc. You know, there are a lot of things in place, so you're absorbing all at once on all three levels. I think that's an important thing to try and understand for me and from my experience.
So, so we've spoken a bit about defining culture and the different elements of it, and the way the values, the physical instantiations, the three levels at which or the levels at which it can operate. So I kind of want to turn to, I don't know, asking for advice as a practitioner. If you're brought in to do a bit of cultural transformation work or cultural insert the blank work, where do you start? What do you do?
Um, so I'll talk you through the process that I went through with a company recently. I think I've mentioned them already, Glass. And the first thing I did was listen to their stories. So I conducted some one-to-one sessions with the C-suite and understood their journey, first of all, so far. So I started with them because I was engaged by them, right? They were my key stakeholders in this scenario. And so I spoke to them about how they felt, what they would see as a successful culture transformation and what that success would look like for them and in their eyes. And I was lucky in that process that they came to me and said, do you know what, it would be amazing for us to hear from our own culture champions how they see the organisation growing and how they react to us giving them time out with you, Nisha, in these culture workshops that you're going to set up with them and get a view. So the first thing is listen to stories and listen to stories of those that have engaged you and understand what that success looks like beyond those values that, you know, they might be part of their company literature and they might be part of what has been laid down at the as a foundation for the company, but then really understand, like trying to understand those lived values, and you're only going to understand them by speaking to people. And so the next step was these stakeholders put forward a list of culture champions. But you know what was really interesting, Dan? They didn't just put forward a list of culture champions who were really enthusiastic about taking that role. They put forward also those that they knew were more questioning in their approach, some who were a little bit cynical in their approach, because then I'd get to hear the reasons why. I'd get to hear their stories as well. And so we put together culture maps. And those culture maps will have, and I'm happy to provide links for these things as part of your show notes. I don't gatekeep anything, right? So I will provide that. And so those culture maps have various different segments in them around the values, the mission, the norms, the meetings, the level of psychological safety, etc. And so I facilitated sessions by bringing people together. And I'm bringing these culture champions together from across the globe, having various separate sessions with them and help them to kind of complete those culture maps. So, for example, sales versus the transaction managers versus marketing versus engineering would have very different culture maps. And then it was a case of me engineering and bringing people together across those different functions to appreciate how different those culture maps would be. And it was so nice seeing them be able to relate to that. And then collectively then measure, okay, so where are we in terms of psychological safety today? And where do we want to go to? And what does that actually mean to us? And what do we think is going to move our score from a scale of 1 to 5? And we say we think, this is an arbitrary figure, say we think we're at a 3 today. Well, okay, within our control, what can we do to move ourselves to a 4? Is that realistic? Okay. No, it's these things that we need to plug to move to a 4. And it's so nice getting to hear that. I'll give you one example. So one of the things that came out was, do you know what? With all of this growth happening in the organization at the moment, we're really not sure about that single direction that we are heading in. We know the overall strategy, but what is that going to mean to us in a year, in 2 years, for example? And the overwhelming feedback was, do you know what? I think we need a town hall. So I was like, okay, put a 15%er exercise on this, right? So I then facilitated like this 15% exercise in that, take that agency back, guys. What can you do, right? To move, you want a town hall, what can you do? And up came a voice to say, from the group, to say, do you know what? We can actually set up that town hall and invite the exec to it, right? That's within our power. We can set that up. We can invite the exec to it. They can help us put that agenda together, but we want to own it. And so they did. And it was just such a nice feeling to have them like take that agency back, to be able to quantify, to be able to put measures in themselves, like what we were talking about before, We want to be able to manage this and measure this. And I got some overwhelming positive feedback, right, from these organizations. So to summarize, it would be listen to the stories that are out there, bring the right people together, bring that level of interest in from the stakeholders, and keep that dialogue open with them so that they know what you're doing, what your touch points are, the feedback that you're getting from people, and establish new methods for communicating what you're doing in regards to culture initiatives. So we recorded a podcast with an internal podcast with the CEO. So it was myself and Sharon, and we, no holds barred. Like, I was quite new to the organization. Sharon was relatively new in her contract. And we asked the CEO in terms of what her expectations were for the culture. What were her reasons for kickstarting the cultural transformation program, etc. And that was made available to everyone in the organization. So, those were the things. Those are good places to start, I would say.
This is, of course, Sharon Williams,
Sharon Wood.
co-host of the Delivery Space podcast.
Yes.
So I'm interested in the maps that you made, the culture maps. Like, how did those work? Like, what did those? We'll share in the show notes, but I can't wait until the show notes. Nisha.
So they talk about, like, they ask questions of people. So meetings, what are the characteristics of meetings that we currently have? What are our norms and rituals? What are the behaviors that go, that are promoted? And this is another point, actually. What are the behaviors that are punished? And a lot of people had a problem, right? A lot of people that we interviewed and we held workshops with said, punish? That appears on the culture map. And I don't think that's the right word. So I'm like, okay, well, what would be the right word for that, and how would you express it? And they were like, well, we wouldn't have that at all. And that was like a really interesting thing, because they said we don't really get punished or struck off or reprimanded in any way for our missteps. We learn from them. So then the dialogue completely changed, because I had taken that culture map, and again, I'll share that with you, but I'd taken that culture map and lifted it, right, from my practice and my toolkit. And so I hadn't really thought about that word. And so then the conversation changed for that segment of the culture map. And it's changed to say, okay, so how do we learn from our mistakes? And are our learning, and it's the way that we learn, effective, right? And do we want to improve the way that we learn? Do we need any more tools, or do we need different constructs around the way that we learn, and allow them to change the dialogue? So roughly, those are the little segments. It's a one sheet of paper canvas with some of those sections in that I talked to you about, and you get a chance to fill those in. So I set some pre-work and said, right, I want everyone that's participating in these culture workshops, to come with their views, and then we'll put them together during the workshop. And I facilitated them so that they're able to synthesize them as a group activity.
And so that makes sense. So the maps end up bringing out the important bits for discussion, and then and then that leads to the ideas and the things like the town halls and the
and another piece of overwhelming feedback was, you know what, I've been promoted to manager status, but I've had no official training. Now, what does that mean if I am buddies with the team that I was in, and I socialize with them outside of work? Now I'm suddenly their manager. How am I supposed to keep that relationship intact, but also feel comfortable with owning the fact that I'm now a manager and everything that goes with that, right? So again, that revealed a piece of mentorship, a piece of leadership coaching, a piece of really nurturing that talent that was emerging within the organization. Not a bad thing. It's what every organization goes through. So it was a chance for people to actually say, hey, you know what? I could really do with support in this area. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting the different roles and how roles play into cultures. And if I'm there to be a manager, that will shift the reality around me. So now
Yes.
I'm not as much part of the team in the same way that I was before. I have there's a different center of gravity that I'm operating
Yeah, I
within.
like that way of expressing it. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
I
still want
see.
to be accepted, but how can I make sure that I'm operating and doing justice to that role, right? And I'm not afraid to say things when I need to say things to the team. Yeah.
It's a problem in the. I think it's a problem in the agile world of Scrum Masters and delivery managers, where we work with a team and we're in a team as a delivery manager, and we spend most of our time with this team, but we're not like supposed to. It's hard to feel like you're part of it because you're not doing the work. You're there to sort of coach and observe and guide and hold space, and it's hard to come say and say, here's my problems, here's what I need from the space. Or if you do, there's like a self-consciousness that comes with asking for those things, and it can be hard to find a community feeling in
Mm.
in the kind of work we do, because you go back to the other delivery managers that you work with or that you work alongside or next to, and they don't know what's going on in your day to day because they're not in your team, and you go to your team who do know what's going on day to day, but you're there to like lead them, and there's a kind of loneliness or a kind of in betweenness.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
There
its
is
own
also
culture.
that assumed responsibility for the team, isn't there? And then because this is a thing that I've struggled with in the Scrum Master role, right? Because I'm an alpha and I want to be I want to see that team succeed. I want to sometimes tell them what to do and step into that mentorship. But then I also realize there's another little voice that's developing in the back of my brain, and it's happened over the past like couple of years, and I've been able to exercise it and try and keep the alpha at bay, Dan.
Mm.
But it is, I'm not there to rescue you. I'm there to show you where there are areas that need improving. I'm there to show you and say, hey guys, I'm noticing these patterns. Can we make them discussable, please? And the consequences of some of these, let's explore them together to see how we can put in areas of improvement, rather than what I used to do, and I've been so guilty of doing this, Dan, is to say, this is where this is what I'm seeing, guys. This is what I'd recommend because this is what I've done in other teams. And boom, doing that like just puts the cart before the horse, because I may have the diagnosis completely wrong, right? So I've, like in my more junior years as a Scrum Master, suffered as a result of that. So yeah, I've fallen flat on my suffered is yeah no fallen flat on my face, and then immediate rejection by a team to say, well, Nisha, how do you know? Like, let's talk this through. How do you know? And you think, okay, hold on, tomato face, and right, you're absolutely right. Let's talk this through. So yeah, I'm that voice has been kind of developing over the past couple of years in the back of my head to say, you're not there to rescue Niche. Like, you're there to reveal those patterns to the team and have them discuss, because then the changes that they will put in place will stick. But once they've discussed them, then you can say, hey, these are the practices that I've used before. If you want to do this, these are the practices that I've used before. These are the techniques. These are the tools that I've used before that really helped. What do you think? Want to try this? That's a better way, right?
And that's also a kind of cultural question. There's a cultural angle to that, right? Like,
Yes.
if as a scrum master it's culturally expected that it's the kind of place where a manager comes and tells a team what to do and that they'll be sort of obeyed or something like that, then even if you come in with your most qualified scrum master, level 2, level 3, whatever, they will
Yeah.
they will find a way of taking your, or you have to be particularly skilled to avoid the feeling of to avoid getting into a dynamic where you're giving them instructions, or they're taking instructions, or they think you're trying to give them instructions, but you're there as the Scrum Master being like, oh, I'm actually trying to just hold space and listen, and they're like, oh, you're trying to tell us what to do, but in a manipulative way. I get it. And you're like, no, 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 it's not like that. And there's
No.
a cultural angle where a different organization, it sounds like the organization you were in had a much more of a, well, we're not going to be told what to do here unless there's good reason, unless there's good evidence. And then you had to adapt yourself to that way of doing stuff.
Yeah. And there are organizations, for example, where they are new to Scrum, right? They've been waterfall for most of their time and they are new to Scrum. And at that point, you are obviously you seek permission and you step into that teaching role rather than a facilitation role. And you're honest and say, right, I'm going to, put on my teaching hat for a minute. I'm going to put on my mentorship hat for a minute and then talk you through how I've seen this done before and I've seen it done really well. But with that, you bring a level of humility. And I think it's very dependent on your, like you just nailed it, dependent on your personality and what you've experienced before in terms of how adept you can be at doing that. When I was a junior Scrum Master, boy, Dan, there are times when I froze, right? Because there are situations I didn't know how to handle. When you're in your early 30s, you're still trying to find your feet, in this field, and you're trying to learn new skills. Yeah, that's why Scrum Mastery isn't an entry level role, because you pretty much learn through making mistakes and doing.
You need to have a sort of wisdom with it.
Yeah.
I'm interested to go back to some of the tools and approaches and things. If there's anything else in the toolkit you alluded to that you bring to the teams you work with.
So I've talked to you about the 15% solutions bit. I've talked to you about the storytelling bit.
Can you say a bit more about the 15% solutions? I think you alluded to it, but
Yeah, okay.
more.
So basically, that gives you wherever someone's feeling stuck or teams are feeling stuck. And you can use this in individual one-to-one coaching sessions. You can use this in team settings as well. And, that's the thing. You can frame it by saying, we wait for those conditions to be perfect. But when you wait for those conditions to be perfect, you're still going to remain in that stuck place. Right. So for us to move forward and feel like we're making progress, because as humans, I think we spoke about this before, you and I, we're as wriggly as hell. We have, ever since we were put on this earth, we wanted to make progress in one way or another, right? We are Bruce Lee's water, right? So what's your 15%? And so it's to ask the team what small action you could take to improve how, for example, we could collaborate, if that's what it is, even if it's just a little bit, or how we can gain visibility. In my example with the Global Loans Agency, how we can gain visibility of strategic direction and bring the stakeholders to us. So what can we do? And then you can reflect individually. You can share in pairs and bring the liberating structure 1, 2 for all into it. If people aren't comfortable in being in larger groups and speaking out, that's pretty much it. It restores the agency back, and it starts shifting that energy to that level of co-creation that you want to see with your teams.
So where 100% is like the perfect solution that is not available now, 15% is something in that direction, but 15% of it, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the, sorry?
I interrupted you in the flow of sharing more tools. So so go on. What else is in that toolbox?
The other thing that's really good to bring out is, have you heard of the heard not heard exercise?
I haven't, no.
Oh, this is really good.
Not heard of the heard not heard exercise.
I've not heard of that. I see what you did there, Dan. I like it.
That's probably the right response to a joke like that.
Right, so this one is where you're making visible what's being said or what's not being said in the system. So you're helping really uncover any, say, marginalized voices, any like implicit rules or understanding that there might be that people aren't being explicit about, or any cultural aspects that you want to shed light on, or you want to give others the opportunity to shed light on, right? So get a blank piece of paper, um, put it into, divide it into two columns: heard, not heard. Then you ask the team members to reflect on, okay, so what phrases, concerns, or truths are regularly heard in the team. On the other side, what's not heard but should be heard, right? Dan, I bust my gut to get that release out, but I never hear you say, Nisha, man, well done for pulling the team together to sort that out. You're my scrum master, right? Um, so those types of things. What gets silent? What gets dismissed? What do they feel is too risky to say? I was shot down in that sprint review by X stakeholder. I'm scared to speak up now. You know, so these things help kind of reveal those, whether there are any, I like to call them like cultural shadows, things like hiding in those shadows, the gaps between what's intentional, and the impact in team dynamics, and any power imbalances that you might see being played out. Obviously, again, this is why I say the sociability really helps with the teams. So even if you can encourage that and put the work in to bring that sociability aspect of the teams alive. We're not saying do pub quizzes every single week and bore people to death, but just find ways where you can bring people together. So when you carry out exercises like this, they don't land splat like on a cold surface. You need to warm people up to things like this and reach out to them, have conversations, have your one-to-ones as a scrum master or an agile coach to really understand people in your team and then bring them together um, to do it. And then, yeah, I'd then always layer it, like especially at the kickoff of projects or products that we're working on with Triz, that reverse thinking, to like disrupt any sort of limiting patterns, that real do you remember? I don't know if you remember this, Dan. You familiar with the Carry On series?
Vaguely from like the 70s.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's kind of in the, I don't even know if it's shown on TV anymore, but it's kind of on par with Benny Hill. You remember Benny Hill? Like everything. No, no.
Like it was TV that was on the TV before I was born. Yeah, I know about it,
I love it.
Like I
Well,
know like I know about the Cold War and like I know about like the Great Depression. Yeah, sure.
oh my gosh. Okay, so it may be not safe to show like Benny Hill and certain Carry On movies, but everything that could go wrong, right? In those kind of settings. Um, Probably very like risque to show right now, but my whole thing is you can have your carry on scenario of disasters play out right in front of you and have fun
Farcical.
doing it, have it farcical, make say those things that that would result in, and say them openly, and have that artistic license, right? When you're asking the group to generate a list of behaviors that are going to undermine trust and collaboration in the team, what's that going to look like so they can get to start to see, even if it is at a comedy level, right? Of all the things that could go wrong, find out from them, well, some of these to a lesser or a larger extent, what of these are happening now, right? How can we stop them from happening now? What are the things that we can put in place and layer the 15% on here? You see? So these are like complementary tools that I use in my toolkit where, the TRIZ assumes a lot of safety, the heard not heard too, but the 15% you can start off with, right? So they're kind of exercises that I've layered into my practice, and so far they're working well.
Mm. Yeah, the 15% is more practical. The
Yeah.
tri- Triz requires people to be able to have silly ideas in front of each other. Heard
That's
not heard,
it. That
heard not heard.
vulnerability.
Yeah,
Yeah.
heard not heard sounds like it. That feels like the quietest of them. It's like the most um, reflective or something
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
Cool. We're coming to the end of our time together. Is there anything that you've been wanting to share or get out, or that the audience would hear about that you haven't had a chance to?
I would say, and it's what I said on one of my other podcasts that I've been on recently, that when you've got cultural misalignments, they won't always be loud and in your face, and for you to be able to detect them. Sometimes before things erupt, there are whispers of those misalignments that there are. There are teams not understanding direction. There are silos. There's lack of the wanting and the ability, for example, to speak up. There is that, maybe frosty relationship with stakeholders, for example. And those things are what I call are those whispers that you can detect. And the last thing I would say is be very mindful of those things, because those things can slow your team down, but they are all fixable. So, to not be daunted by them, to understand that they are all fixable, and to build that level of safety within your teams that you're then able to develop that very free flowing, easy to communicate environment for even difficult things that need to be said. There you go.
That feels like a great place to call it to a close. Nisha, where can people find out more about you and your work?
LinkedIn, I have started posting a lot more regularly. And as you know, the podcast goes out twice a week. So that's great. And also Substack. So I've started my own Substack, and that is also shared on my LinkedIn page. So just click view my blog and you can access my weekly ruminations. Let's put it that way.
Nisha, thank you for joining us on Intelligent Teams.
Oh, it's an honour. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Intelligent Teams podcast. I've been your host, Daniel Susser. If you enjoyed this episode, there's a good chance you'll enjoy being a subscriber to the Intelligent Teams Substack. It's intelligentteams.substack.com. You'll receive a free weekly newsletter featuring an episode of this podcast or writings about cognitive science and building intelligent teams. See you next time.